The courtroom went completely silent when the little boy's voice cracked through the tension. 8 years old. Brown eyes filled with tears, small hands gripping the wooden rail so tight his knuckles turned white. And then he asked the question that would break the internet and change everything anyone thought they knew about justice. Judge Caprio, are you sending my daddy to jail? If you've ever wondered what real compassion looks like in the face of the law, you need to hear this story. Drop a comment right now, telling us what you would do if you were in Judge Caprio's position. Hit that subscribe button, because what happens next will restore your faith in humanity. This isn't just another courtroom story. This is about a moment when everything hung in the balance. When one decision would either destroy a family or save it, and when the whole world would be watching. Providence, Rhode Island. Municipal Court. Tuesday morning, October 15th. The calendar showed 37 cases scheduled that day. Traffic violations mostly. Parking tickets, the usual parade of people hoping for mercy, expecting justice, fearing the worst. But case number 23 was different. Michael Torres, age 34, father of 2. Construction worker, cited for driving with a suspended license, expired registration, and failure to appear on previous violations. The kind of case that usually takes 5 minutes. Pay the fine, do the time. Next. But nothing about this case would be usual. Judge Frank Caprio sat behind the bench reviewing the file. 27 years on the bench. Thousands of cases. A reputation for fairness that had made him a local legend and, thanks to the internet, a global phenomenon. His show, Caught in Providence, had racked up hundreds of millions of views. People loved watching him dispense justice with wisdom and heart. But even Judge Caprio didn't know what was about to walk through that courtroom door. Like this video, if you believe judges should consider the whole story, not just the violation. Because what Judge Caprio was about to discover would test every principle he'd ever stood for. Case number 23. Michael Torres. The clerk called out. The doors at the back of the courtroom opened. A man walked in, shoulders slumped, wearing a faded blue work shirt with Torres Construction embroidered on the pocket. Work boots scuffed and dusty, hands calloused and scarred from years of manual labor. But he wasn't alone. Behind him, holding his hand, a little boy. 8 years old, white, button-up shirt too big for his frame, probably borrowed. Black pants with a small tear at the knee, carefully stitched closed. And those eyes, dark brown eyes that looked up at his father with a mixture of love and fear that made everyone in the gallery take notice. Mr. Torres, please approach the bench, Judge Caprio said, his voice carrying that familiar tone of authority mixed with warmth. Michael walked forward, the little boy's hand still locked in his. And who is this young man with you? The question was gentle, but there was curiosity there. It wasn't common for defendants to bring their children to court. This is my son, Your Honor. Danny, he wanted to come today. The boy's grip tightened on his father's hand. Judge Caprio looked down at the file, then back up at the man and boy standing before him. Mr. Torres, it says here you were pulled over on September 28th, driving with a suspended license. This also isn't your first violation. You've had multiple citations over the past 18 months. Can you explain to me what's happening here? Quote. Michael Torres took a deep breath. His hand was shaking slightly. Danny felt it and looked up at his father, then at the judge, then back to his father. Your Honor, I know I made mistakes. I'm not here to make excuses. His voice was steady, but you could hear the strain underneath. My license was suspended because I couldn't pay the fines from a previous ticket. I was driving because I had to get to work. I have 2 kids. Danny here, and his sister Maria, she's 5. Their mother, my wife Carmen, she's sick. Has been for 2 years now. The courtroom was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning hum. Judge Caprio leaned forward slightly. What kind of sick, Mr. Torres? This was the moment when the case stopped being about traffic violations and started being about something much bigger. Stage 3 breast cancer, Your Honor. The words hung in the air. Several people in the gallery gasped softly. One woman in the back row put her hand over her mouth. She's been through surgery. Chemotherapy, radiation. We've been fighting it together. But I'm the only one working now. She can't. The medical bills are crushing us. I took on extra shifts, weekend work, anything I could get. But I fell behind on the fines. And then the license suspension happened. And then I had a choice. Stop driving and lose my job, or keep driving and risk this. Share this with someone who needs to understand what real struggle looks like. Because what Michael Torres was about to reveal would show just how impossible some choices really are. Judge Caprio's expression shifted. The stern judge's face softened just slightly. But the law was the law. Mr. Torres, I understand your situation is difficult, but driving with a suspended license is serious. You could have hurt someone. You could have hurt yourself. What happens to your children if something happens to you? It was a fair question, a necessary question, but before Michael could answer, little Danny stepped forward. The boy had been silent up until now, watching, listening, taking it all in with those big brown eyes. But something in the judge's words triggered something in him. Fear, desperation, love. Please don't send my daddy to jail. His voice was small, but it cut through the courtroom like a knife. Every eye turned to him. Judge Caprio looked directly at the boy, his face unreadable. Danny, is it? The boy nodded. Danny, I'm not trying to hurt your daddy. I'm trying to help him understand that what he did was dangerous. Danny's eyes filled with tears. His lip quivered. But if he doesn't drive, he can't work. And if he can't work, we don't have money for Mommy's medicine. And if Mommy doesn't get her medicine, she could die. The words came out in a rush, like he'd been holding them in for so long they just exploded out. My teacher says judges put bad people in jail. My daddy isn't bad. He's the best daddy in the world. The gallery was completely silent. One of the court officers, a tough-looking woman named Officer Patricia Morrison, who'd been on the job for 15 years, turned away slightly and wiped her eye. The court reporter stopped typing for a moment, her hands frozen over the keys. Judge Caprio set down his pen. He looked at Danny for a long moment, then at Michael, then back at Danny. Come here, son, he said gently. Danny looked up at his father. Michael nodded, giving permission. The boy walked slowly to the bench, his small shoes squeaking slightly on the polished floor. When he reached the bench, he had to crane his neck up to see the judge. Judge Caprio stood and came around the bench, kneeling down so he was at eye level with the boy. Danny, how old are you? 8, sir. 8.5. 8.5. That's a good age. You're in what grade? 3rd grade. Mrs. Patterson's class at Roosevelt Elementary. The specificity of it made it real. This wasn't just a boy. This was Danny Torres. 3rd grader, son, brother, kid, who was living through something no 8-year-old should have to understand. And you came here today because you were worried about your dad? Danny nodded, tears now streaming down his face. I heard him talking to Mommy last night. He said he might have to go to jail because of the driving. Mommy was crying. Maria was sleeping, but I was awake. I heard everything. I told Daddy I wanted to come and tell the judge that we need him. We need him so much. Quote, hit that subscribe button right now if you believe children should never have to beg for their parents' freedom. Because what Judge Caprio said next would become one of the most shared moments in internet history. The judge put his hand on Danny's shoulder. Danny, your daddy did break the law. Do you understand that? Danny nodded. But sometimes people break laws not because they're bad people, but because they're in impossible situations. Do you know what impossible means? It means you can't do it, Danny said quietly. It means no matter what you choose, something bad happens. The judge smiled slightly. This kid was wise beyond his years. That's exactly right. Your daddy was in an impossible situation. And I want you to know something very important. Are you listening? Quote. Danny nodded, his full attention on the judge. Your daddy loves you very much. And your mommy too. The fact that he's here, the fact that he brought you, the fact that he's willing to face the consequences of his choices, that tells me he's not a bad man. He's a man who made a difficult choice in a terrible situation. Judge Caprio stood up and turned back to Michael. The father's face was wet with tears now. He wasn't even trying to hide them anymore. "Mr. Torres, I've been on this bench for 27 years. I've seen thousands of cases. I've heard every excuse, every story, every plea. And I've learned something important. Justice isn't just about punishment. It's about understanding. It's about seeing the whole person, not just the violation." The judge walked back behind the bench and sat down. He picked up his pen, looked at the file, then looked back at Michael and Danny. "But I also have a responsibility to this court, to this community, to everyone who follows the law, even when it's hard. If I just let everyone go because they have a sad story, what kind of message does that send?" It was the crucial question. The moment of tension. Everyone in the courtroom held their breath. The inspector who had written the ticket, a veteran cop named Sergeant James Russo, stood at the side of the courtroom. He'd been doing this job for 19 years, written thousands of tickets, testified in hundreds of cases. But even he was leaning forward, wondering what would happen next. Drop a comment and tell us what you think the right decision is here. Should compassion override the law, or should the law be applied equally no matter what? Because Judge Caprio was about to make a decision that would spark debate across the entire country. "Mr. Torres, tell me about your wife's treatment. Where is she being treated?" Michael cleared his throat. "Rhode Island Hospital, Your Honor. She has an oncologist there, Dr. Sarah Chen. She's been amazing. Carmen's been going through a new chemotherapy protocol. It's aggressive, but it's working. The tumors are shrinking." A small smile crossed Michael's face despite the circumstances. 3 months ago, they told us it might be hopeless. Last week, they said if the treatment keeps working like this, she might make it. She might actually beat this thing. "And how do you get her to her treatments?" Judge Caprio asked. "I drive her, Your Honor. The treatments are 3 times a week. Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. She's too weak to take the bus. Too sick to ask friends every time. I finish work, pick up the kids from my mother-in-law's house, go home, get Carmen, drive her to the hospital, wait with her through the treatment, drive her home, put her to bed, make dinner for the kids, help Danny with his homework, get Maria to sleep, and then I do it all again the next day." The exhaustion in his voice was palpable. This wasn't a man trying to get away with something. This was a man being crushed by life and still showing up every single day. Judge Caprio turned to his computer screen and started typing. The courtroom waited. Danny had moved back to his father's side and grabbed his hand again. "Your Honor," Michael said quietly, "I know I have to face consequences. I'm ready for that. But if there's any way, any possible way, that I can keep working and taking care of my family while I pay my debt to society, I'm begging you. Not for me. For them. For Carmen. For Danny and Maria. They've been through so much already." The judge stopped typing and looked up. "Mr. Torres, I'm looking at your record here. Before these recent violations, you had a clean record. 18 years of driving, not a single ticket. Not one. Then your wife got sick, and suddenly there's a pattern. Unpaid fines, missed court dates, suspended license. This tells me something. It tells me this isn't who you are. This is what desperation looks like." Officer Morrison, the court officer who'd wiped her eyes earlier, nodded slightly. She'd seen this before. Good people crushed by circumstances. The system wasn't designed for nuance. It was designed for efficiency. But here was a judge who understood the difference. "Your Honor, may I speak?" A voice from the gallery. Judge Caprio looked up, surprised. "Who's speaking?" A woman stood up, mid-40s, wearing scrubs. Badge clipped to her pocket. "My name is Jennifer Martinez. I'm a nurse at Rhode Island Hospital. I work on the oncology floor." "I know Carmen Torres." The room erupted in whispers. Judge Caprio raised his hand for silence. "Approach the bench, Miss Martinez." The nurse walked forward. She looked at Michael with kind eyes, then addressed the judge. "Your Honor, I don't usually come to court. I don't get involved in my patients' personal business. But I saw the court date on Carmen's calendar when I was helping her schedule her next treatment. She was crying, scared about what would happen to Michael. I told her I'd come if I could. I traded shifts to be here. Like this video, if you believe in people who show up for others even when they don't have to. Because what Jennifer Martinez was about to say would change the entire trajectory of this case. Your Honor, I've been a nurse for 22 years. I've worked with hundreds of cancer patients. And I can tell you without hesitation that Carmen Torres is alive today because of that man standing there. The dedication he shows, the care he provides, the way he never misses an appointment, never complains, never gives up on her. Some patients have whole families supporting them and still struggle. Carmen has Michael, and she's thriving because of it. Quote, Judge Caprio listened intently. Ms. Martinez, in your professional opinion, what would happen to Carmen's treatment if Michael was incarcerated? The nurse didn't hesitate. She would likely miss treatments. Her mother tries to help, but she's elderly and doesn't drive. The bus system doesn't have reliable access to the hospital from their neighborhood. Missing even 1 or 2 treatments could severely impact her prognosis. At this stage in her therapy, consistency is everything. The judge nodded slowly. He turned back to Michael. Mr. Torres, I'm going to ask you something, and I want complete honesty. If I show you leniency today, if I give you a chance to make this right without jail time, can you promise me you'll follow through? Can you promise me you won't let your family down, won't let this court down, and won't let yourself down? Quote. Michael stood up straighter. Your Honor, I swear to you on my children's lives, on my wife's life, on everything I hold sacred, I will do whatever you ask. I will follow every rule, meet every requirement, pay every fine. Just please, please let me be there for my family. Danny was crying again, trying to be quiet, but his little shoulders were shaking. Judge Caprio saw it. Everyone saw it. The judge took a deep breath. This was the moment. The decision that would either spark outrage or celebration. The moment that would define not just this case, but would become a lesson in what justice could be when applied with wisdom and heart. Mr. Torres, I'm going to tell you something. The law is clear about driving with a suspended license. It's serious. It's dangerous. It cannot be ignored. But the law is also supposed to serve justice, and justice is supposed to serve humanity. Share this video with someone who needs to understand that the law and compassion aren't opposites. Because what Judge Caprio did next would become a master class in judicial wisdom. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm suspending all fines in this case pending completion of a community service program. You will complete 100 hours of community service. You will attend a driver safety course and pay for the reinstatement of your license through a payment plan that this court will establish based on your ability to pay. $20 a month. That's it. You will also check in with this court every 30 days for the next 6 months so we can monitor your progress and your wife's health. The courtroom erupted. People were crying. Someone started clapping and others joined in until Judge Caprio raised his hand for order. I'm not finished. The room went silent again. Mr. Torres, I'm also going to make a call to Rhode Island Hospital's patient services. I happen to know the director, Margaret Sullivan. We go back years. I'm going to see if we can arrange transportation assistance for your wife's treatments so the burden doesn't all fall on you. I'm also going to connect you with a social worker from our victim services office. Yes, you're the defendant today, but your family are victims of circumstance, and we have resources that can help. Michael Torres's legs nearly gave out. He grabbed the table to steady himself. Danny looked up at his father, then at the judge, trying to understand what was happening. Does this mean Daddy's not going to jail? The boy asked, his voice hopeful and scared at the same time. Judge Caprio smiled at him. A real warm smile that transformed his whole face. Danny, your daddy's not going to jail. But he is going to work very hard to make things right, and I'm going to need you to help him. Can you do that? Danny nodded so vigorously his whole body moved. I can help. I can do chores. I can watch Maria. I can be really good. The judge laughed softly. I'm sure you can. You're already being very brave by coming here today. Not many kids would do that for their dad. He turned back to Michael. Mr. Torres, I want you to understand something. I'm giving you this chance not because I think what you did was okay. I'm giving you this chance because I believe in redemption. I believe in families. And I believe that sometimes the right thing to do is the harder thing, not the easier thing." The gallery was filled with people wiping their eyes. Sergeant Russo, the cop who wrote the ticket, walked up to Michael as they left the bench. "Mr. Torres, I need you to know something." His voice was gruff, but not unkind. "When I pulled you over that day, I was doing my job. I saw a violation and I wrote it up. That's what I'm trained to do. But if I'd known your full story, if I'd understood what you were going through, I might have handled it differently. Take care of your family, man. And drive safe." He extended his hand. Michael shook it, tears running down his face. "Thank you, officer. I will. I promise." Quote, "Hit subscribe right now because we're about to tell you what happened in the months after this moment, and you won't believe how this story continues." Danny walked over to Judge Caprio, who was gathering his papers. "Judge Caprio?" The judge looked down at the boy. "Yes, Danny? Thank you for not sending my daddy to jail. I'm going to write you a letter and draw you a picture." The judge knelt down again. "I would love that, Danny, and I want you to do something for me." "I want you to work hard in school. Help your mom and dad. Be good to your sister. And remember that even when things are hard, there are people who care. People who will help. Can you remember that?" Quote. Danny nodded. "I'll remember." The case was over. The bailiff called the next case. But no one in that courtroom would forget what they'd just witnessed. Officer Morrison approached Jennifer Martinez, the nurse, as they left. "That was really good of you to come." Jennifer smiled. "Carmen is special. They all are. Michael comes to every treatment." He holds her hand through the nausea, the pain, the fear. He makes the nurses laugh even when he's exhausted. "Their little girl Maria made us all cards last month thanking us for taking care of her mommy. How could I not come? How could I not try to help?" The video of the hearing was uploaded to YouTube that afternoon. By evening, it had 100,000 views. By the next morning, 2 million. By the end of the week, it had exploded across every social media platform. 23 million views and counting. The comments section became a phenomenon of its own. "This is what a real judge looks like. That little boy's voice broke my heart, and then Judge Caprio fixed it." We need more judges like this in the world. The law with compassion is justice. The law without compassion is just tyranny. But not everyone agreed. Some commenters were angry. "This is exactly what's wrong with our system. He broke the law. He should face consequences like everyone else." What about the people who followed the rules even when it was hard? Do they look like idiots now? Sob stories shouldn't get you out of legal obligations. The debate raged. Talk shows picked it up. Legal experts weighed in. But through it all, Judge Caprio stood by his decision. Drop a comment right now telling us whether you think Judge Caprio made the right call. Did he uphold justice or undermine it? Because the answer might be more complicated than you think. 2 weeks after the hearing, Michael Torres walked into the community service office to begin his hours. He was assigned to work at a local food bank, sorting donations and helping with deliveries. The coordinator, a woman named Ruth Washington, recognized him immediately. "You're the guy from the video. The one with the little boy." Michael nodded, a bit embarrassed. "That's me." Ruth smiled. "My daughter has cancer. Stage 2. I understand your life more than you know. Welcome to the team. Let's get you started." Michael threw himself into the work. He showed up early and stayed late. He worked with quiet intensity, grateful for the chance he'd been given. Other volunteers would chat and joke, but Michael just worked, lifting boxes that weighed 40 pounds like they were nothing, organizing shelves with meticulous care, treating every can of soup, every box of pasta, every bag of rice like it was precious. Because to someone, it was. After his third shift, Ruth pulled him aside. "Michael, can I talk to you for a minute?" He nodded, worried he'd done something wrong. "You're working too hard," she said gently. "You're going to burn yourself out." Michael shook his head. "I need to finish my hours. I need to show Judge Caprio. I meant what I said." Quote. Ruth put her hand on his arm. "I understand." But I also need you to understand something. This isn't punishment. The judge didn't send you here to suffer. He sent you here to be part of something. Community service means being part of the community. Let yourself connect with people. Let yourself be helped even while you're helping others." The wisdom in her words hit him. He'd been so focused on completing his obligation that he'd forgotten to be present. That night, he went home and told Carmen everything. She was in bed, weak from that day's treatment, but her eyes were bright as she listened. "Michael, you've been carrying all of this alone for so long. Let people in, let them help. We don't have to do this by ourselves." Like this video, if you've ever felt like you had to carry the world alone and forgot that other people wanted to help, because Michael was about to learn a lesson that would change not just his circumstances, but his entire perspective on life. The next community service shift, Michael opened up. He talked to the other volunteers, shared his story, listened to theirs. There was Robert, a retired teacher doing service hours for a DUI he got after his wife died, and he'd spiraled into depression. There was Keisha, a 23-year-old who'd written bad checks to pay her rent and was working off her debt. There was Carlos, a 60-year-old who'd let his grandson borrow his car and the kid had gotten in trouble, and now Carlos was here taking responsibility. Each person had a story. Each person had faced impossible choices. Each person was trying to make it right. They became friends, they shared meals, they looked out for each other. When Michael mentioned he was struggling to afford the driver safety course, Robert offered to teach him the material for free. He'd been a driver's ed instructor for 30 years. When Keisha heard about Carmen's cancer, she brought over meals her grandmother cooked. "My grandma's a terrible cook, but she means well," Keisha joked. "But also she's actually amazing and this chicken will change your life." The community that formed around Michael was unexpected and precious. Meanwhile, Judge Caprio had kept his promise. He called Margaret Sullivan at the hospital. "Maggie, I need a favor." Margaret and Frank Caprio had known each other since college. She trusted him completely. "What do you need, Frank?" "I have a family. Husband's doing everything he can to keep his wife alive. 2 small kids. They're drowning in medical bills and transportation costs. Can you help?" Margaret didn't hesitate. "Send me the information. We have programs for this. I'll make sure they're taken care of." Within a week, Carmen Torres received a call. Rhode Island Hospital was enrolling her in a patient assistance program that covered transportation to and from treatments. Medical van would pick her up, bring her to her appointments, and take her home. The cost? Nothing. It was covered by a grant-funded program for cancer patients in need. Carmen cried when she got the call. Maria, her 5-year-old daughter, climbed into her lap. "Why are you crying, Mommy? Are you sad?" Carmen hugged her daughter tight. "No, baby. I'm happy." Sometimes people cry when they're really, really happy. But the story was far from over. The viral video had caught the attention of someone unexpected. A businessman named David Chen, owner of a successful construction company in Providence, had watched the video 3 times. He'd been moved by Danny's plea, touched by Michael's dedication, impressed by Judge Caprio's wisdom. David had built his business from nothing. He'd come to America with $200 and a dream. He understood struggle. He understood sacrifice. He picked up his phone and called the court. Share this video with someone who believes that success creates the responsibility to lift others up. Because what David Chen was about to do would create ripples that extended far beyond one family. "I'm trying to reach Judge Caprio's office. My name is David Chen. I watched the video about Michael Torres. I want to help." The secretary was used to calls like this. The viral videos generated hundreds of offers of help, most well-intentioned, but impractical. "Mr. Chen, that's very kind, but the family's situation is being handled through appropriate channels. If you'd like to donate to the court's Victim Services Fund, I can direct you." "I don't want to donate to a fund," David interrupted gently. "I want to offer Michael Torres a job." That got her attention. "Hold, please." She transferred the call to Judge Caprio's law clerk, a sharp young woman named Amanda Pierce. Amanda listened as David explained his offer. "I run a construction company, Chen and Associates. We do commercial and residential work throughout Rhode Island. If Michael Torres is a construction worker like the video said, I want to offer him a position, better pay, health insurance, flexible schedule, so he can take care of his family. I know what it's like to need a break. Someone gave me one 30 years ago. It's time I passed it forward. Amanda was skeptical. Mr. Chen, with respect, we get a lot of offers after these videos go viral. How do I know this is legitimate? Quote, come to my office, meet me, check out my business. Do a background check, whatever you need. I'm not some internet stranger making empty promises. I'm a businessman with the means and the desire to help. Give me that chance. Amanda did her due diligence. David Chen was exactly who he said he was. Chen and Associates Construction had been in business for 28 years. They had contracts with major developers throughout the state. Revenue in the tens of millions. Excellent reputation. David himself had a personal story that read like an American dream. Immigrant. Worked as a day laborer. Saved every penny. Started his own company. Employed over 100 people. Gave back to his community through scholarships and charitable work. Amanda called David back. Mr. Chen, I've vetted your offer. It's legitimate. But I need to ask, why? Why this family? Why now? David was quiet for a moment. My wife died of cancer 8 years ago, lung cancer. Never smoked a day in her life, just bad luck. I know what it's like to watch someone you love fight that battle. I know what it's like to work yourself to exhaustion, trying to keep everything together. I know what it's like when your kids look at you with scared eyes, wondering if everything's going to fall apart. I couldn't save my wife, but maybe I can help save someone else's. Maybe that's enough. Amanda felt her throat tighten. I'll arrange a meeting. 3 days later, Michael Torres sat in David Chen's office. The space was impressive, but not ostentatious. Pictures of completed projects lined the walls. Awards and certifications filled a bookshelf. Family photos showed David with 2 adult children, all smiling. Hit that subscribe button, because what happened in this meeting would set up a transformation that proves redemption is real, and second chances can change everything. Michael, thank you for coming, David began. I want to offer you a job, project manager for our residential division. $65,000 a year starting salary, full benefits including health insurance that will cover your entire family, and flexible scheduling so you can be there for your wife's treatments and your kids' needs. What do you say? Michael stared at him. Mr. Chen, I don't understand. I'm just a construction worker. I've been swinging a hammer and laying brick for 15 years. I'm not a manager. Why would you offer me this? Quote. David leaned forward. You want to know what I saw in that video? I saw a man who shows up, who takes responsibility, who doesn't make excuses but also doesn't give up. Those are the qualities of a leader, Michael. I can teach you the technical parts of project management. I can't teach character. You already have that. Michael felt tears welling up. I don't know what to say. Say yes, David smiled. Say yes, and then let's get to work. Your family needs stability. Your wife needs her treatments covered by good insurance. Your kids need to see their father thrive, not just survive. Let me help make that happen. Michael took the job. He started the following Monday. The learning curve was steep. Project management meant coordinating contractors, managing budgets, dealing with clients, solving problems. But Michael approached it the same way he'd approached everything else in his life, with relentless dedication and humble determination. David mentored him personally. When a client complains, listen first. When a contractor makes a mistake, find the solution before assigning blame. When your team succeeds, give them credit. When something fails, take responsibility. That's leadership. Michael soaked it up like a sponge. Within 2 months, he'd completed his first project on time and under budget. A kitchen renovation for a young couple in East Providence. They sent a thank you card with a picture of their new kitchen and a note that read, "Thank you for treating our home like it mattered. You're a true professional." David framed it and put it on Michael's desk. That's your first one. Start a collection. Measure your success by the people you help. Meanwhile, Danny Torres was keeping his promise to Judge Caprio. He'd written a letter in his careful third-grade handwriting. Dear Judge Caprio, thank you for not sending my daddy to jail. He is working really hard. He has a new job and he smiles more now. Mommy is getting better. The doctor says the cancer is smaller. Maria and I are being really good. I got an A on my spelling test. I wanted you to know because you were nice to us. Your friend, Danny Torres. P.S. I drew you a picture of us in the courtroom. That's you with the hammer. That's me and Daddy holding hands. That's the flag. I hope you like it. The picture was exactly what you'd expect from an 8-year-old. Stick figures with big circle heads. But Judge Caprio received it with more emotion than any legal brief or official commendation. He called his secretary in. Helen, I want you to do something for me. Frame this letter and this picture. Put it on the wall behind my desk where I can see it every day. Helen, who'd worked for Judge Caprio for 16 years and thought she'd seen everything, raised an eyebrow. Your Honor, you have commendations from governors, awards from legal associations. You're putting a crayon drawing behind your desk? Judge Caprio looked at her with absolute seriousness. Those awards tell me I know the law. This picture tells me I understand justice. There's a difference. Like this video if you believe the most important measure of success isn't what you achieve but who you help along the way. Because Judge Caprio's decision was about to create ripples he never anticipated. The video continued to spread. News outlets picked up the story. Good Morning America reached out for an interview. Judge Caprio, Michael, Carmen, and Danny all appeared on the show together. Millions watched as Danny, now more confident and smiling, sat on his father's lap and told America about his mommy getting better and his daddy's new job, and how Judge Caprio was the nicest judge in the whole world. The host, a veteran journalist named Rebecca Mills, asked Judge Caprio the question everyone wanted answered. Your Honor, some critics say you went too soft, that you let emotion override the law. What do you say to that? Quote, Judge Caprio didn't hesitate. I say they're confusing the law with justice. The law is a tool. Justice is a goal. We use the law to achieve justice, but when the law becomes an obstacle to justice, we've lost our way. Michael Torres broke the law. That's indisputable, but incarcerating him would have destroyed a family, likely cost a woman her life by disrupting her treatment, and traumatized 2 small children. What justice would that serve? What purpose would that accomplish? The law allows for judicial discretion precisely because every case is unique. I exercised that discretion in the interest of justice. I'd do it again. The audience erupted in applause. But the story still wasn't over. 6 months after the initial hearing, Michael returned to court for his final check-in. He'd completed all 100 hours of community service, finished the driver safety course, made every monthly payment. His license was fully reinstated. Carmen was with him this time, walking slowly but walking. Her hair was growing back in soft waves. She was thinner than she'd been before the cancer, but there was life in her eyes again. Hope. Judge Caprio smiled when he saw them enter. Mr. and Mrs. Torres, it's good to see you both. Mrs. Torres, how are you feeling? Carmen stepped forward. Your Honor, I wanted to come today to thank you personally. 6 months ago, my family was falling apart. We were drowning. You threw us a lifeline. Michael has thrived in his new job. We have health insurance that's covering my treatments. The cancer is in remission. The doctors are optimistic. My children have their father at home. We have hope again. You gave us that. She was crying. Michael put his arm around her. Judge Caprio came around the bench again. Mrs. Torres, I didn't give you anything. Your husband earned it. He showed up. He did the work. He kept his promises. All I did was give him the opportunity. He did everything else. Quote, but you believed in him, Carmen said, when nobody else did. When the system just saw another violation, another case number, another file to process, you saw a man, a father, a husband. You saw a family. That belief changed everything. Judge Caprio turned to Michael. Mr. Torres, I'm officially closing your case today. You've completed all requirements. You're in full compliance. But before I do, I want to say something. You came into this courtroom 6 months ago as a defendant. You're leaving as an example of what redemption looks like, what responsibility looks like, what love looks like. I'm proud of you. Michael couldn't speak. He just nodded, tears streaming down his face. Danny and Maria were there too, sitting in the front row with their grandmother. Danny was wearing a suit this time, probably the first suit he'd ever owned. When Judge Caprio finished speaking, Danny jumped up and ran to the bench. Share this with someone who needs to be reminded that the darkest moments can lead to the brightest transformations. Because what Danny did next would become the final perfect moment in this incredible story. "Judge Caprio, I wrote you another letter." The boy pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket. Judge Caprio took it and read it aloud. "Dear Judge Caprio, 6 months ago I was scared. I thought you were going to take my daddy away. But you didn't. You helped him instead. Now everything is better. Daddy has a good job. Mommy is getting well. Maria and I are happy. I learned something from you. I learned that being powerful means helping people, not hurting them. When I grow up, I want to be a judge, just like you. Or maybe a doctor. Or maybe both. Thank you for showing me that good people can make the world better. Love, your friend, Danny." P.S. Maria drew you a picture too, but she's only 5, so it's not as good as mine. P.P. Hess. Don't tell her I said that. The courtroom erupted in laughter and applause. Judge Caprio knelt down one more time. "Danny, you keep writing me letters, okay? And you work hard in school. Maybe you will be a judge someday. Or a doctor. Or anything else you want to be. The world needs good people like you and your family." The case was closed. The Torres family walked out of the courtroom together, holding hands. But the impact of that day 6 months earlier continued to spread. David Chen's construction company saw a surge in business after people learned about his hiring of Michael. "We want to work with a company that has heart," one client said. David started a program called Second Chance Construction that specifically hired people who'd been through the justice system and needed an opportunity to rebuild their lives. Within a year, he'd hired 23 people through the program. 19 of them were still employed and thriving. Ruth Washington at the food bank kept in touch with Michael. He continued to volunteer even after his required hours were complete. "This place saved me," he told her. "Not because of the work, but because of the people. I'm not leaving." He organized a volunteer recruitment drive that brought in 40 new volunteers. The food bank was able to expand services to 3 new neighborhoods. Jennifer Martinez, the nurse who'd testified, became a regular speaker at hospital events about patient advocacy. "Sometimes advocacy means showing up in court for your patient," she'd say. "Sometimes it means making a phone call. Sometimes it means just holding someone's hand, but it always means seeing the whole person, not just the diagnosis." Carmen's cancer remained in remission. 2 years after the court case, she was declared cancer-free. The doctors were amazed. "Your spirit had a lot to do with this," Dr. Sarah Chen told her. "Your body was fighting the cancer, but your will to live for your family fought even harder." Drop a comment right now and tell us what this story meant to you. Has it changed how you think about justice, compassion, or second chances? Because we want to hear from you. Judge Caprio continued doing what he'd always done, making tough decisions, showing compassion, dispensing justice with wisdom. The video of Danny's question and the judge's response became one of the most watched courtroom videos in internet history. Over 50 million views across all platforms. It was shared in law schools as an example of judicial discretion, played in ethics classes as a case study in moral reasoning, referenced in countless articles about criminal justice reform. 3 years after the initial hearing, Judge Caprio received an award from the National Association of Criminal Justice. Michael Torres was invited to present it. He stood at the podium in a suit that actually fit, confidence in his voice, speaking to a room full of judges, lawyers, and justice officials. 3 years ago, I stood before Judge Caprio as a desperate man who'd made mistakes. I was ready for punishment. I expected condemnation. What I received was a chance, not a free pass, not a dismissal of responsibility, but a chance to prove that I was more than my worst moment. Judge Caprio saw something in me that I'd stopped seeing in myself. He saw potential, dignity, worth, and he structured a consequence that held me accountable while giving me the tools to succeed. That's not soft justice. That's smart justice. That's justice that actually works. Today, I'm a project manager at a successful construction company. I'm a homeowner. My wife is cancer-free. My kids are thriving. I mentor other men who are struggling with the weight of responsibility and the fear of failure. And I owe all of it to a judge who understood that justice isn't just about what you deserve, it's about what's possible. Judge Frank Caprio, it is my honor to present you with this award. The standing ovation lasted 3 minutes. Judge Caprio accepted the award with his characteristic humility. "I don't deserve this," he said quietly into the microphone. "I just did what any judge should do. I looked at the whole person. I considered the consequences. I chose the path that served justice, not just the law. If that's award-worthy, then we've set the bar too low. This should be the standard, not the exception." But the most important moment came later that night. Judge Caprio returned home to find an envelope in his mailbox, hand-delivered. Inside was a card with a drawing. An older Danny's artwork, more sophisticated now, but still, with that childlike earnestness. It showed a courtroom, a judge behind a bench, a man and a boy holding hands. And above it all, in careful lettering, "This is the day our life changed. Thank you for changing it for the better." Hit subscribe one more time if this story touched your heart, because stories like this remind us why compassion matters, why justice requires wisdom, and why second chances can transform not just individuals but entire communities. Judge Caprio kept that drawing next to the first one, 2 snapshots of the same family, 3 years apart, one showing fear and desperation, the other showing gratitude and hope. The transformation was complete. The story had come full circle. But the lessons remained. When Michael tucked Danny into bed that night, the now 11-year-old asked him a question. "Dad, do you ever think about that day in court when I asked the judge if he was sending you to jail?" Michael smiled. "Every single day, buddy. Every single day." "I was so scared," Danny admitted. "I know you were. I was scared too." "But you didn't show it," Danny said. "You were brave." Michael shook his head. "No, Danny, you were brave. You stood up in that courtroom and you spoke from your heart. You advocated for your family. That takes more courage than anything I've ever done. You saved us that day, not the judge. You." Danny thought about that. Really. Judge Caprio is a wise man, a good man. But what moved him wasn't the law or the case file or the circumstances. It was you. It was seeing a little boy who loved his father so much that he was willing to stand in front of a judge and fight for him. That's what changed everything. Danny smiled and closed his eyes. "I love you, Dad. I love you too, son. More than you'll ever know." As Michael left the room, he thought about the journey they'd been on, the desperation, the fear, the impossible choices, the moment when everything could have fallen apart. And then the grace, the compassion, the second chance that became a transformation. He thought about Judge Caprio's words. Justice isn't just about punishment, it's about understanding. He thought about David Chen's generosity, Jennifer Martinez's advocacy, Ruth Washington's wisdom, all the people who had shown up, helped out, believed in them. He thought about Carmen, sleeping peacefully in their bedroom, her body finally free of the cancer that had nearly taken her. He thought about Maria, 8 years old now, and thriving, completely unaware of how close they'd come to losing everything. And he thought about Danny, 11 years old and already understanding things about courage and love that some adults never learn. The Torres family had been broken. And then, through the compassion of a judge, the generosity of a businessman, the kindness of strangers who became friends, they'd been put back together. Not just repaired, transformed. Better than before, stronger, more grateful, more aware of how precious and fragile and beautiful life could be. This is what redemption looks like. This is what justice looks like when applied with wisdom and heart. This is what happens when we see people, not cases, humans, not numbers, families, not files. Judge Frank Caprio didn't just change one man's trajectory that day. He changed a family. He inspired millions. He proved that the legal system, for all its flaws and limitations, could still be a force for good when guided by the right principles. Like this video if you believe our justice system needs more Judge Caprios and fewer people who see compassion as weakness. Share it with someone who needs hope. Comment below and tell us your story of second chances or times when someone showed you unexpected grace. Because these stories matter. They remind us of who we want to be. They challenge us to think differently about punishment and redemption, about rules and relationships, about law and love. The Torres family story didn't end that day in court. It began there. Every day since has been a chapter in a new story. A story about rebuilding, about overcoming, about learning that your worst moment doesn't have to define your future, that redemption is real, that second chances, when earned and honored, can lead to transformations that inspire millions. As the months and years continued, Michael Torres became a voice for criminal justice reform. He spoke at community events, shared his story at reentry programs, mentored men coming out of incarceration. Everyone deserves a second chance, he'd say, but you have to earn it. You have to show up. You have to do the work. You have to prove that the faith people place in you wasn't misplaced. Judge Caprio gave me an opportunity. I had to turn that opportunity into a transformation. That part was on me. His message resonated. Men and women who'd made mistakes, who'd been crushed by circumstances, who'd lost hope. They heard Michael's story and saw a possibility. If he could rebuild his life, maybe they could too. If Judge Caprio could show that kind of compassion, maybe the system wasn't completely broken. Maybe there was still room for grace. Maybe they still had a chance. Carmen started a support group for cancer patients and their families. She understood the unique challenges of fighting a disease while trying to keep a family together. Cancer doesn't just attack your body, she'd tell newly diagnosed patients. It attacks your finances, your relationships, your stability. But you don't have to fight it alone. Ask for help. Accept help. Let people in. Her group grew to 50 regular members. They met twice a month at the hospital, shared resources, encouraged each other, celebrated victories and mourned losses together. Carmen had taken her suffering and turned it into service. Her near-death experience became a ministry of presence for others walking the same dark path. Danny kept his promise. He worked hard in school, made honor roll every semester. In 8th grade, he wrote an essay for his civics class titled, "The Day Justice Had a Heart." He wrote about his father's mistakes, his mother's cancer, his fear that his family would be destroyed. And then he wrote about Judge Caprio. Real justice, Danny wrote, isn't about revenge or punishment for the sake of punishment. Real justice asks what will make things better, not just what will make someone pay. Judge Caprio understood that sending my father to jail might have been legal, but it wouldn't have been just. Justice requires wisdom, and wisdom requires seeing the whole picture, not just the violation. I learned that day that the most powerful people are those who use their power to help, not to hurt. The essay won first place in a statewide competition. Danny was invited to read it at the State House. Judge Caprio was in the audience. When Danny finished reading, the judge stood and applauded with tears in his eyes. Afterwards, they took a picture together, the judge's hand on the teenager's shoulder, both smiling. Danny would keep that picture on his desk through high school, through college, through law school. Yes, law school. Because Danny kept another promise too. Subscribe to our channel right now because we're about to wrap this up with one final moment that will prove sometimes the impact of one compassionate decision can echo through generations. 10 years after that day in court, Judge Frank Caprio presided over his final case before retirement. He was 78 years old, 40 years on the bench. Thousands of lives impacted, millions of views online. A legend in judicial circles, and a hero to ordinary people who'd watched his videos and seen what justice could look like. His courtroom was packed for the final hearing. Media crews, local officials, former defendants who'd been shown mercy and turned their lives around. And in the front row, the Torres family. Michael, now 44, successful and stable. Carmen, cancer-free for 8 years and glowing with health. Maria, 15 years old and beautiful. And Danny, 18 years old, about to start his freshman year at Boston College with plans to major in political science and eventually attend law school. Judge Caprio looked out at the crowd. For 40 years, I've had the privilege of sitting behind this bench. I've seen the best and worst of humanity. I've made decisions that I agonized over and decisions that were easy. But the cases I remember most aren't the big ones. They're the ones where I had the chance to change a trajectory, to offer grace instead of condemnation, to choose the harder right over the easier wrong. He paused, his eyes finding the Torres family. 10 years ago, a little boy asked me if I was sending his daddy to jail. In that moment, I had a choice. Follow the letter of the law or follow the spirit of justice. I chose justice. And I watched that family transform. Not because of me. Because of them. Because they took the chance they were given and honored it. Because they proved that redemption isn't a fairy tale. It's real. It's possible. It requires work and commitment and courage, but it's possible. Michael Torres stood up. Judge Caprio nodded at him. Your Honor, may I speak? Of course, Michael. Michael walked to the front of the courtroom. Danny stood and walked with him, father and son, side by side. Your Honor, 10 years ago you changed my life. But more than that, you taught me something. You taught me that justice without compassion is just cruelty in a robe. You taught me that the law is supposed to serve humanity, not the other way around. You taught me that second chances aren't gifts, they're responsibilities. And you taught my son something even more important. He put his hand on Danny's shoulder. You taught him what kind of man he wants to become. Danny, you want to tell the judge your news? Quote. Danny stepped forward, now a young man, no longer the scared 8-year-old who'd begged for his father's freedom. Judge Caprio, 10 years ago you saved my family. Today I want you to know that I've been accepted to Boston College. I'm going to study political science and then go to law school. And when I become a judge, I'm going to try to be exactly like you. Because you showed me that the most important question in any courtroom isn't, what does the law say? It's, what does justice require? Thank you for teaching me that. Thank you for saving my family. Thank you for being the example I'll spend my life trying to live up to. Judge Caprio stood and came around the bench one final time. He embraced Danny. The courtroom erupted in applause. Cameras flashed. But in that moment, it was just an old judge and a young man whose lives had intersected 10 years earlier, in a moment of grace that had changed everything. Danny, I'll be watching your career, Judge Caprio said quietly. The world needs judges like you're going to be, judges who understand that we're here to serve justice, not just enforce rules. Promise me you'll remember that. I promise, Danny said. I'll never forget. Judge Caprio stepped back and looked at the assembled crowd. This is why I did this job. Not for the salary or the prestige or the viral videos, but for moments like this. For the chance to plant seeds of grace and watch them grow into forests of transformation. If I've done that even once, if I've changed even one life for the better, then 40 years was worth it. He banged his gavel for the final time. This court is adjourned. But the legacy wasn't adjourned. It was just beginning. Because Danny Torres wasn't the only young person inspired by Judge Caprio's example. Across the country, law students watched the videos. Young people considering careers in justice saw a different model. Not tough-on-crime rhetoric or soft-on-crime permissiveness, but wisdom-based justice. Justice that asked hard questions and made hard choices. Justice that held people accountable while giving them the tools to change. Justice that understood that sometimes the right decision isn't the obvious one. Comment below and tell us what you'll do differently because of this story. Will you show more compassion? Give someone a second chance? Stand up for someone who needs an advocate? Because that's how these stories matter, when they change not just the people involved but the people who witness them. The Torres family went home that night and sat around their dinner table. They held hands and prayed. Michael thanked God for second chances. Carmen thanked God for healing. Maria thanked God for her family. And Danny thanked God for Judge Caprio. "He didn't just save you, Dad," Danny said. "He showed us all what we could become, what we should become. And I'm going to spend my life paying that forward." Michael squeezed his son's hand. "We all will, Danny. We all will." Years would pass. Danny would graduate from Boston College with honors, attend law school at Georgetown, clerk for a federal judge, work as a public defender, representing people who couldn't afford lawyers, understanding better than most what it meant to need someone to fight for you. And eventually he'd be appointed to the bench himself, Judge Daniel Torres, following in the footsteps of the man who'd saved his family, applying the lessons he'd learned in that courtroom 10 years earlier, seeing the whole person, asking what justice required, not just what the law allowed, giving second chances to people who earned them, becoming, in his own way, the kind of judge Judge Caprio had been. The cycle complete. The legacy continued. The impact of one compassionate decision rippling forward through time, touching lives that hadn't even been lived yet when that 8-year-old boy asked his desperate question. This is what real justice looks like. This is what compassion can accomplish. This is what happens when we see each other as humans first and categories second. When we ask not just what did they do, but who are they? What's their story? What's possible here? Judge Frank Caprio understood something that many in positions of power forget. Authority is most powerful when wielded with wisdom, and justice is most just when tempered with mercy. He didn't go soft on crime. He went smart on humanity. He didn't ignore the law. He applied it with the discretion and wisdom it was designed to allow. He didn't let Michael Torres off the hook. He gave him a longer, harder hook to climb, one that required sustained effort and genuine transformation. And Michael climbed it. Because that's what people do when you believe in them, when you give them not a free pass but a real chance, when you structure consequences that hold them accountable while giving them the tools to succeed. Share this video one more time. Send it to someone who works in the justice system. Send it to someone who's lost faith in second chances. Send it to someone who needs to remember that compassion and accountability aren't opposites. They're partners in creating real change. And then ask yourself, who in your life needs a second chance? Who needs someone to see past their mistakes to their potential? Who needs an advocate, a believer, a person who will structure their accountability in a way that makes success possible, not just punishment inevitable? Maybe it's a family member who's struggling with addiction. Maybe it's a coworker who made a mistake and is being written off. Maybe it's a kid in your neighborhood who's headed down the wrong path. Maybe it's you. Maybe you're the one who needs to believe that your worst moment doesn't define your future. That redemption is real. That transformation is possible. That someone, somewhere, will see your potential instead of just your problems. If that's you, let the Torres family's story be your inspiration. Let Judge Caprio's wisdom be your guide. Let Danny's courage be your example. Stand up. Speak up. Fight for yourself the way Danny fought for his father. And then, when you've climbed out of whatever hole you're in, reach back and pull someone else up. Because that's how grace works. That's how justice works. That's how we create a world where second chances aren't rare exceptions, but expected opportunities. Where wisdom guides the law, instead of the law replacing wisdom. Where we measure success not by how many people we punish, but by how many people we help transform. This is the story of an 8-year-old boy who asked a question, a judge who answered with wisdom, a father who earned his second chance, a mother who fought cancer and won, a family that was broken and became whole. and a legacy that will echo through generations. What will you do with this story? How will it change you? What second chance will you give? What grace will you extend? What transformation will you make possible? The answer to those questions will determine whether this story ends here, or whether it continues through you, rippling forward, touching lives, changing trajectories, proving once again that the most powerful force in the world isn't punishment or revenge or strict adherence to rules. It's love, it's grace, it's wisdom, it's compassion, it's justice tempered with mercy. It's the decision to see people, not just their mistakes, to ask what's possible, not just what's deserved, to choose the harder right over the easier wrong. Judge Frank Caprio made that choice. Michael Torres honored it. Danny Torres was inspired by it. And now it's your turn. What will you choose? Drop your answer in the comments. Share your story. Tell us about a time someone gave you a second chance, or you gave one to someone else. Let's build a community of people who believe in redemption, who practice compassion, who understand that justice without wisdom is just cruelty with a gavel. Thank you for watching. Thank you for caring. Thank you for believing that stories like this matter. Because they do. They remind us of who we are, who we can be. What's possible when we lead with our hearts while engaging our minds? What's achievable when we refuse to reduce people to their worst moments and instead challenge them to become their best selves? This is the story of the day an 8-year-old asked if his daddy was going to jail, and a judge said no, but gave him something harder than jail. A chance to prove he was more than his mistakes. And that chance changed everything. Subscribe for more stories of justice, redemption, and the extraordinary things that happen when ordinary people are seen, heard, and given the opportunity to transform. This is just one story. There are thousands more, and we'll keep telling them, because the world needs to know that compassion isn't weakness, that second chances aren't soft, that holding people accountable while giving them the tools to succeed isn't about being easy on crime, it's about being smart on humanity. See you in the next video. Until then, remember what Judge Caprio taught us. Justice isn't just about what people deserve. It's about what's possible. And what's possible is always more than we think when we lead with wisdom, compassion, and grace.